right, thank you so much. We have breaking news. A key piece of evidence emerges in the plane crash in the French Alps as investigators recover one of the two black boxes on board. It is a scene of devastation as France's worst plane crash in 3 decades likely claims all 150 lives on board. You are looking at the scene. Look at that. This is near the remote site high in the French Alps, 25 miles from the Italian border. Germanwings Flight 9525 took off from Barcelona on its way to Dusseldorf. Only 40 minutes into the trip, it suddenly began to fall at a steep 60 feet per second. The A320 jet didn't send a distress call, but minutes later, air traffic controllers lost contact. They declared an emergency. The Obama administration says there's no indication of a link to terrorism at this time. The cause of the crash, though, is puzzling investigators, as it did not follow a typical disaster pattern. The widely flown A320 crashed in broad daylight shortly after reaching cruising altitude, typically the safest part of the journey. I am joined now by Tom Sullivan of Fox Business. We also have Dan Henninger of the Wall Street Journal, Katie Pavlich of townhall.com. She is a Fox News contributor. Tom Sullivan, I'm going to start with you because you're the one with pilot's experience. Are you surprised they found the black box so quickly? When you look at the scene as we see it there, the debris, they found it right away.
Somewhat, because there's a lot of debris, but it's also, they know it's daylight, at least it was, it's dark now. But it's also, it's not a black box, it's an orange box. There's 2 of them. And so if you're looking at your debris field, hopefully the orange would stand out, and that's why they paint them orange, that they will stand out among the debris.
And do you think that will have all the clues?
Yes, because this is a mystery. So there's two boxes. One is the flight data recorder, which measures well over 100 different things going on with an airplane, and the other one is the cockpit voice recorder. And the old models used to be 30 minutes.
We don't know which one they have, right?
We don't know which one.
Yeah, okay.
So they'll find, if they find one, they'll find the other, and both of those are really going to unravel this mystery. That's why they have these, because this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Dan, you know, we heard a Lufthansa spokeswoman a short time ago saying that they don't want to speculate at all what happened, but it is a mystery. What comes into your mind?
What comes into my mind is the fact that we know so little. I wanted to ask Tom quickly, do those boxes send out signals that would allow us to identify where they are?
No.
They don't.
No, and that was the problem with the Malaysia flight.
Right. Well, that's kind of the point I wanted to raise. In an era of such advanced electronics, now this is a 23-year-old plane, you can't expect it to have that sophisticated electronics. We go through this every time. The flight controller sent out a distress call, nothing came back. Presumably they're communicating person to person. My question is whether on these planes you should have a computer system that is in fact communicating with air traffic control rather than the pilot itself. I know this is a controversial thing to bring up pilot error versus whether computers should be flying these planes, but we keep going through this problem every time, and I think it would make sense if we had a computer talking to the ground.
There is a beacon that does go off that's a separate instrument that does go off on a crash of all planes, small planes, big planes, doesn't matter. That beacon was on this plane, but that's not in the cockpit voice recorder. It's a separate device.
Yeah.
Okay. Katie, I'm going to ask you to hang up for a second because I want to bring in we have someone on the phone right now, Jim Hall. He's the former chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. He joins us now on the phone. I want to bring you in because, of course, you chaired the NTSB from 1994 to 2001. You have a lot of experience in this area. What is your best guess right now? What do you think happened?
Well, anything at this point is speculation. It appears to be a catastrophic breakup of the aircraft, and that could have resulted from either mechanical, operational, or a criminal act.
As an investigator, are there clues so far that jump out at you that catch your attention?
No, I mean, the good news is we have the recorders. I have long advocated having, in addition, a cockpit video recorder attached as part of the black boxes, because many times there's actions going on in the cockpit that we still have difficulty interpreting. But with those recorders, we should know fairly soon what caused this tragedy.
Jim, is it meaningful to you that they didn't send out a distress signal?
Well, there is on each one of the on the black boxes a distress signal, but many times they will break up and break off at an impact like this and not send the signal. That's why I have been for deployable recorders. All of these two items, as well as real-time transmission, are being considered by the International Civil Aviation Organization. It just unfortunately takes time to get consensus among 300 nations.
No doubt. Jim, thank you so much. I want to go back to my panel for a reaction to that. Katie, in this day and age, I mean, it seems like it makes a lot of sense to, in addition to having a voice recorder and a data recorder, as he suggested, to have a video recorder, especially right now when we are so concerned about acts of terror on board. And I'm not connecting that to this because we have no idea what happened here, but it enters everyone's mind. And as he said, in this day and age, does it make sense to have a video recorder?
I think it does, and I think that a lot of engineers are constantly working on that kind of technology inside our universities and our aviation universities, teaching people actually how to fly. And they take a lot of feedback from pilots who are in those cockpits about what would be helpful for them, and also from investigators who go to these scenes and say this would be helpful in us, you know, developing new information about what happened. In the end, this happens very rarely. As horrible and as tragic as it is, this is the first accident, I believe, for this airline. This is not something that happens a lot with commercial airlines, but unfortunately when it does, of course we want all the answers, and the good news in this case is that they do have the plane, they do have the black boxes, and the families are going to get some answers eventually, whereas with the Malaysia flight, for example, hasn't been found. Those families still don't have closure. So at least in this case, there is going to be some closure, you know, despite how tragic it really is. But yes, that is a technology that they should develop.
I'll tell you who fights the camera, and that's the unions, pilots' unions. They don't want a camera in their workspace.
Well, I mean, you already have the voice data recorder and the voice recorder and the data recorder, so why is the video so much worse?
Well, like Jim Hall said, there are still, when they're listening, there's still they would like to be able to see.
Right.
So the investigator would like to have the camera. The pilots' unions usually say, please don't.
Because?
Privacy.
Yeah. Dan, does that make sense to you?
It does. Well, what makes sense to me is that they should have all the information possible given the consequences of an event like this. And if it includes video recorders in the cockpit, I can't think of any reason why you couldn't make an argument for doing that on planes that you could retrofit now. I mean, I was talking earlier about new planes that should have sophisticated electronics. These are old planes, but they could have them retrofitted to do that sort of thing.
You mentioned how long it's been since something like this happened. The last major crash in the Alps was one on Air India in 1966. There were no survivors on board. The deadliest on French soil. This is the deadliest on French soil since 1981. That is certainly a while back. This is a treacherous scene in terms of trying to recover debris. We know that it is about a 2-hour hike from the nearest staging area, where right now they have hundreds of people who are there and getting ready. We're supposed to know more tonight. I want to bring in now Oliver McGee. He joins us from Washington. He is a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Transportation. Thank you so much for joining us. You served in that role from 1999 to 2001. And you've seen a lot of accidents in your day. What do you make of this one?
Well, I think this is probably an issue on equipment. This appears to be, the best speculation says it may be a decompression that took place. We're talking about pilots' use of glass cockpits, fly-by-wire in the Airbus series, compared to fly-by-cable in the cable. On the Boeing series. Pilots like fly by cable because they can feel the aircraft better. They can feel how it moves. They can aviate, navigate better. Fly by wire, glass cockpits, sometimes they black out. This could have happened here if we can speculate. Everything I'm saying is speculation until we get the black boxes in place. But that's a preference between the pilots. And insofar as having recordings inside the cockpit, That's a good thing that Mr. Hall is suggesting, because the more information we get, the better we know how to investigate these crashes.
Yeah.
And more importantly, real-time tracking of these aircraft is by ICAO and ATA is very, very important to have this right now. And I think there's going to be more movement in that right now.
Tom Sullivan wants to jump in. Go ahead,
One of the things that you mentioned, though, the Airbus is a very sophisticated plane, and they will send out a master warning to the pilots that if there is a decompression, they will also send a signal to the ground, to their operations center, and no word of that being received by the airline. So,
yeah, what do you think of that, Oliver?
Well, right now, we don't know really what is being received by the airlines or air traffic control or anything until we get those black boxes in place. Everything that I said is speculatory, and everything you see in the news. But that is a possible scenario that could be the case here.
Okay.
Glass cockpits do black out, and sometimes the pilots get a little bit in trouble zones in that.
We heard from a Lufthansa official a few moments ago. Let's listen to that real quick.
For the time being, we say it's an accident. There's nothing more that we can say right now. Everything else would be speculation.
Oliver, do you rule out sabotage at this point based on the evidence, or are you pretty close to it?
I'm pretty much so ruling out any type of terrorism or sabotage at this point. I'm not absolutely correct on that. We always have to keep that scenario open, but that's a low probability. This was a slow, controlled descent, and the communications with the air traffic control was consistent. But it doesn't strike me as anything catastrophic was happening. And it was a 4,000 foot per minute control consent, and that's usually generated by autopilot in the fly-by-wire systems.
Oliver, thank you so much. We appreciate it.